Hey guys, I'm going to try and continue on the lecture the best I can. Remember last time we left, Odie, go play. Last time we left, we were talking about investigations into DWIs or DUIs. They're very difficult to do. It's very intimidating for police officers when they first hit the street. And a lot of reason for that is simply because a lot of the good attorneys are going towards DUIs because a lot of people with money get DUIs and they know they're very easy to be beat if you get a good attorney. Good attorneys many times can defeat you in court and actually have your investigation thrown out because they are complicated. And I think the intimidation on many new officers is they are resistant to stop DUIs because they know they're difficult. Keep in mind, attorneys are very good at finding things or mistakes that officers have made in their investigation. And they will go back to that very first moment of contact, and if they can show that you did something wrong, then they can have the entire case thrown out, regardless of whether or not the defendant that you arrested had a blood alcohol content that was illegal. So going back to the first class, and before we start into the lecture, I want to let you know that because we really are not going to be doing the tests like I normally do, I'm going to be putting a quiz online on Canvas for you to complete, and that's how we're going to get the remaining points for your the remainder of the class for your grade. So again, complete the quizzes for this DUI, the DWI investigation. I'll have the quiz online after you've watched this and then the next video presentation. Okay, so let's go back to lesson 1, which I talked about, which is when you're going to do a DUI investigation, they're in 3 phases. You want to make sure that you investigate based on 3 phases. This is not something that law enforcement or agencies just made up. The agency, the federal agency that oversees safety in the United States is the NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. They have issued guidelines on how officers should conduct investigations. And remember, there's a reason for this. Clearly, people drive under some alcohol or drug. I think the latest figure is every minute somebody is hurt in this country based on somebody driving when they should not be driving. So it is a very serious problem. So as we discuss this, this is why we have a federal agency with oversight trying to teach law enforcement this is what you need to do. So remember, 3 phases that the NHTSA wants you to be looking at. Phase 1 we talked about last time was that vehicle in motion or driving behavior. I want you to be very cautious, like I mentioned last time. Do not get caught up in a false arrest. There are certainly things that I do not want you to put your integrity on the line. When I talk about phase 1 driving behavior, you're looking for vehicles that are driving erratic, that potentially could be driving under the influence of some alcohol or drug. You can't sit out in front of a bar and wait for patrons to leave and just expect that to be good enough to stop a vehicle. Yes, many cops have done this, and many cops have lost their jobs for doing that. You cannot stop them. It is not reasonable suspicion just because somebody exits a bar, or if you see somebody carrying a 6-pack out of a convenience store. You cannot do that. You have to visually watch a vehicle driving and justify, why do you think this vehicle needs to be stopped? The only exception to this, there's one exception. Most states have a system where you can call star DUI. If somebody else sees someone swerving in the road and they dial this star DUI, if you are dispatched to someone reporting what they suspect to be a drunk driver, you do not need to see visual impairment of that vehicle. That person calling in alone gives you the authority to stop that vehicle. That is the only exception. So remember, driving behavior. And we're going to go over a few things about driving behavior specifically that we didn't talk about last time. A couple of things I want you to put into perspective. And we talk about a lot of terminology that it's going to come up in this lecture. It's not in your book. We don't have a book for this class. This is things that are taught in a police academy after you've graduated. When we use the term BAC, Baker, Adam, Charlie, that's blood alcohol content. You're going to hear this a lot throughout my lecture. When we talk about blood alcohol content, when someone's blood alcohol is at about a 0.03, we know based on 50 years of research that their reaction time at just that level is going to be very slow, or much slower than it normally is. At 0.05, which remember Utah just went to 0.05, we know that the judgment certainly of that person is impaired. They're going to be limited a little bit on their judgment. We know when you get to 0.08, your vision is impaired. And remember, when we start talking about this, your vision is not specifically impaired at 0.05. Yes, judgment, but not vision. And it's not until you become a 0.10 that we know that you have poor coordination. So when we discuss these topics, every state's going to determine when is it illegal. And that's extremely important to remember. Illegal per se is you cannot have this amount of alcohol in your blood. In Utah, it's 0.05. Most states, it's 0.08. So when we're watching vehicle, remember, if you're seeing a vehicle, phase one, and you're trying to assume, or when you're watching this vehicle that's in motion, you're going to be looking and keying in on a lot of things. The attachment that I gave you to read will give you a lot of specifics. It's 4 categories that I want you to be concentrating on. The National Highway Safety Board has said there are 4 different categories that we want you to be looking at when you see a vehicle in front of you that's going to make you wonder something's wrong here. The first category, and the most common, is the vehicle is having problems maintaining their lane or their lane position. Second category is the vehicle is having a difficult time with speed and braking. We'll come back and give specifics later. The third category is vigilance problems. And the last category is judgment problems. So, clearly when we talk about trying to maintain the lane, certainly when you see a car weaving, it can't stay inside their travel lane. They're going back and forth. And when you use this as a judgment to stop a car, many people make a mistake and will go over a line. I'm not talking about just crossing a line once. I'm talking it's repetitive behavior. Clearly, over and over, they're leaving their travel lane. They're drifting. They're straddling lines. They're swerving. This is pretty obvious. When you see someone taking a turn, a very wide sweeping turn is very problematic. We know that this could be an indicator of somebody drinking or having alcohol in their system. The second category is a little bit more difficult. When we talk about speed and braking, with alcohol, for some reason, it's usually driving under the speed limit. If you come upon a vehicle that is driving extremely slow, 10 miles, 15 miles, 20 miles an hour under the speed limit, you have to assume maybe something is in their system, alcohol or some drugs. Another thing is braking. One of the key indicators of braking is when you see braking lights keep coming on and off. It's just flash, flash, flash. People that are intoxicated are nervous and they keep hitting their brakes. So if you see somebody that's driving under the speed limit and their brake lights are tap, 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 again, and in the document that I gave you, we've got mathematical figures that will tell you that when somebody is doing that, we know that 65% of the time, alcohol is at play when you're driving under the speed limit and you're tapping your brakes. And then put that on top of swerving in the lane, you might be as high as 75% of the time this person has something in their system. So again, look for these indicators. Braking speed, extremely important. The third category is we're talking about vigilance problems. Vigilance problems are, for instance, you see a vehicle driving at night and they don't have their headlights on. Clearly something's wrong there when they don't realize their headlights are on. They're sitting at a stoplight, and as you pull up behind them, the light turns green and they don't go. I mean, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Again, vigilance problems. Things are just not right. They're driving the wrong way on the road. Clearly a strong indicator that something's not right. So again, these vigilance problems, look at those things in the handout that I gave you. And then the next one is judgment problems. Judgment problems, again, are things like they're following cars way too close, improper lane changing, driving on something other than a designated highway. I know we laugh about this, but you're going to see people driving on the shoulder, on the dirt part of the road, places that they should not be driving. Again, they're intoxicated. So those are the types and the 4 categories that you're going to be looking at when you're driving behind of a vehicle. Most of the time, you're going to see strong indicators of swerving, brake lights. You get behind the vehicle, and after a point of time, you're going to have to weigh this. It's unsafe to let them go. Do you have enough reasonable suspicion to stop the vehicle? You at some point when you go to court are going to be questioned, why did you stop my vehicle? Make certain that you have enough of these 4 categories so when you're asked this question, you can respond and your case is not dismissed. Your worst case scenario is you have very weak reasons for stopping this vehicle. Even though you put them through all these other tests later and you find out they're drunk and they're way above a 1.0, you'll lose the case if you don't concentrate on judgment problems about driving. So again, these are the standards. The next lecture I'm going to do, we'll talk about, so you've got a lot to stop them. Now you've stopped the vehicle. Do not walk up to the door and say, get out of the vehicle. Bad idea. Phase 2 is, why did you get my client out of the vehicle? You have to justify this. Next lecture, we'll go over those things that you need to do to justify why did you get this person out of the vehicle. Stay safe. If you have any questions, send me an email. And again, be listening to the lecture and looking at the handout. I'm going to be giving you a quiz based on this information once we talked about all 3 phases. See you next time.